Question 1. A multinational manufacturing firm aiming to bolster the credibility of its environmental product declarations, EPD, in line with ISO 14027-2019, is exploring the integration of blockchain technology. The firm wants to leverage blockchain to ensure the tamper-proof nature of its LCA data and verification reports. Considering the foundational principles of EPD development and the potential of distributed ledger technology, what is the most significant advantage blockchain offers for EPD verification, according to the spirit of ISO 14027-2019? Option A. Significantly reducing the computational resources required for conducting complex life cycle assessments. Option B. Establishing an immutable and auditable trail for EPD data and verification processes, thereby enhancing trust and transparency. Option C. Automating the entire process of EPD generation, eliminating the need for human oversight. Option D. Providing a centralized database for all environmental performance metrics across different product categories. Correct answer is B. Establishing an immutable and auditable trail for EPD data and verification processes, thereby enhancing trust and transparency. Explanation. The core principle of ISO 14027-2019 is to provide guidelines for the development of environmental product declarations, EPD, focusing on transparency, comparability, and credibility. When considering the integration of blockchain technology for EPD verification, the primary benefit lies in its inherent immutability and distributed ledger capabilities. This means that once an EPD's data, or a cryptographic hash of that data, is recorded on a blockchain, it becomes exceptionally difficult to alter or tamper with without detection. This directly addresses the need for trustworthy and verifiable environmental information, a cornerstone of EPD development. Specifically, blockchain can create an auditable trail of the data used in an EPD's life cycle assessment, LCA, and the verification process itself. This enhances confidence for stakeholders, including consumers, regulators, and business partners, by providing a robust mechanism to confirm the integrity of the declared environmental performance. The standard emphasizes the importance of reliable data and transparent processes. Blockchain aligns with these by offering a secure and transparent method for data storage and verification, thereby bolstering the overall credibility of EPDs. The challenge is not in the calculation of LCA data, but in the secure and verifiable recording of this data and its associated verification certificates. Therefore, the most significant contribution of blockchain to EPDs, as envisioned within the framework of ISO 14027, is the enhancement of data integrity and the establishment of an immutable audit trail for the entire EPD lifecycle. Question 2. A manufacturing firm is preparing an environmental product declaration for a newly developed bio-based composite lumber intended for construction. The primary challenge lies in sourcing reliable life cycle inventory data for the novel binder used in its production, as established industry databases lack specific entries for this unique component. Considering the principles outlined in ISO 14027-2019 regarding data quality assessment and improvement for EPD development, which of the following strategies would best address the data gap for this specific binder while maintaining the integrity and credibility of the EPD? Option A. Rely on qualitative descriptions of the binder's environmental characteristics based on expert opinion, without quantifying specific inputs or outputs in the life cycle inventory. Option B. Conduct a targeted, detailed primary data collection study for the binder's manufacturing process, including energy consumption, raw material inputs, and waste generation, and document all assumptions and methodologies used in the study. Option C. Exclude the binder's contribution from the EPD altogether, focusing only on the wood fiber component, and state that data for the binder was unavailable. Option D. Utilize generic data from the closest available bio-based adhesive in existing databases, assuming similar environmental impacts without further investigation or specific justification. The correct answer is B. Conduct a targeted, detailed primary data collection study for the binder's manufacturing process, including energy consumption, raw material inputs, and waste generation, and document all assumptions and methodologies used in the study. Explanation. ISO 2019 emphasizes the critical role of data quality in the development of environmental product declarations, EPD. It outlines principles for assessing and improving data to ensure the reliability and credibility of EPDs. When developing an EPD for a novel composite material, a primary concern is the representativeness and accuracy of the underlying life cycle inventory (LCI) data. The standard suggests a multifaceted approach to data quality, encompassing relevance, accuracy, completeness, consistency, and verifiability. For a new material, obtaining LCI data that meets these criteria can be challenging. Primary data collection through direct measurement and process analysis is generally preferred for its specificity and accuracy. However, for novel materials, this may not always be feasible or cost-effective for all life cycle stages. In such cases, using high-quality secondary data from analogous materials or processes, carefully documented and justified for its applicability, can be a necessary step. The key is to rigorously assess the suitability of any proxy data and to clearly disclose any assumptions or limitations. Furthermore, the standard advocates for a systematic approach to identifying data gaps and implementing strategies to fill them, which might involve targeted primary data collection or the use of modeling techniques. The credibility of the EPD hinges on the transparency and robustness of this data assessment and improvement process, ensuring that the environmental information presented is both meaningful and defensible. The focus is on achieving the highest possible data quality within practical constraints, with a clear understanding of the uncertainties involved. Question 3. Consider a scenario where an organization is developing an environmental product declaration, EPD, for a new type of biodegradable packaging material. The product category rules, PCR, for this material group permit either a cradle-to-gate or a cradle-to-grave system boundary definition. Initial screening indicates that while the manufacturing processes are relatively low impact, the end-of-life phase, specifically the degradation rate and potential byproducts in various disposal environments, could represent a significant portion of the material's overall environmental footprint. Given the objective of providing a comprehensive and informative EPD that accurately reflects the material's environmental performance, which approach to defining the system boundary would best align with the principles of ISO 14027, 2019 for developing credible environmental product declarations? Option A. Selecting a cradle-to-grave boundary, but excluding the use phase if its environmental impacts are deemed negligible compared to manufacturing and disposal, to streamline the assessment process. Option B. Limiting the system boundary to cradle-to-gate to focus solely on the environmental impacts associated with production and raw material acquisition, as this is often the most data-intensive phase. Option C. Adopting a cradle-to-gate boundary, but supplementing it with qualitative statements about potential end-of-life impacts to compensate for the excluded life cycle stages. Option D. Defining the system boundary to encompass the cradle-to-grave life cycle, including all stages from raw material extraction through manufacturing, distribution, use, and end-of-life, to ensure a complete assessment of environmental impacts. The correct answer is D. Defining the system boundary to encompass the cradle-to-grave life cycle, including all stages from raw material extraction through manufacturing, distribution, use, and end-of-life, to ensure a complete assessment of environmental impacts. Explanation. The question pertains to the foundational principles of life cycle assessment, LCA, as applied within the framework of ISO 14027, 2019, specifically concerning the development of environmental product declarations, EPD. ISO 14027, 2019 emphasizes the importance of robust and transparent LCA methodologies to ensure the credibility of EPDs. A critical aspect of LCA is the definition of system boundaries, which dictates the scope of environmental impacts considered throughout a product's life cycle. This includes raw material extraction, manufacturing, distribution, use, and end-of-life stages. Selection of system boundaries is not arbitrary. It must be justified based on the intended use of the EPD, the product category rules, PCR, and the significance of potential environmental impacts. When considering a product's life cycle, it is crucial to include all relevant processes that contribute significantly to the overall environmental profile, even if they occur in different geographical regions or involve complex supply chains. The principle of cradle-to-grave or cradle-to-gate analysis, depending on the PCR and the product type, guides this boundary definition. For instance, if a product's primary environmental hotspots are identified in its manufacturing phase and end-of-life disposal, these stages must be thoroughly encompassed within the system boundary. Furthermore, ISO 14027, 2019, in alignment with ISO 14040 and ISO 14044, stresses the need for consistency in applying these principles across similar products to facilitate comparability. The goal is to provide a comprehensive and representative assessment of environmental performance. Therefore, excluding a significant stage like the use phase, if it contributes substantially to the product's environmental burden, would violate the principle of completeness and could lead to misleading EPD information. The choice of system boundary directly influences the data requirements and the interpretation of results, making its careful and well-documented selection paramount for the integrity of an EPD. Question 4. Consider a scenario where a chemical facility manufactures a primary industrial solvent and, as a co-product, a specialized cleaning agent. An environmental product declaration, EPD, is being developed for this specialized cleaning agent. The manufacturing process involves shared energy inputs, raw material streams, and waste treatment facilities. According to the principles outlined in ISO 14027, 2019, for developing environmental product declarations, which approach would be most appropriate for allocating the environmental burdens of the shared processes to the specialized cleaning agent? Option A. Allocate based on a fixed percentage determined by historical production data, without re-evaluating the allocation factors as production methods or market demand evolve. Option B. Allocate all environmental burdens to the primary solvent, assuming the specialized cleaning agent is a negligible byproduct with no significant resource consumption. Option C. Allocate based on the physical relationship between the co-products, considering factors such as mass or energy content that reflect their contribution to the shared process inputs and outputs. Option D. Allocate solely based on the market value of the primary solvent and the specialized cleaning agent at the point of sale, regardless of their production volumes or resource intensity. The correct answer is C. Allocate based on the physical relationship between the co-products, considering factors such as mass or energy content that reflect their contribution to the shared process inputs and outputs. Explanation. The core principle of establishing a system boundary in environmental product declarations, EPD, according to ISO 14027, 2019, involves defining the scope of the life cycle assessment, LCA, to be included. This boundary dictates which processes and environmental impacts are considered from raw material extraction through end of life. When a product system utilizes inputs from or provides outputs to other product systems that are not the primary focus of the EPD, the question of allocation arises. Allocation refers to the method of partitioning the environmental burdens and benefits of a process or system when it produces multiple outputs or uses multiple inputs, where only one output or input is relevant to the product system under study. ISO 14027, 2019, in alignment with ISO 14040 and ISO 14044, emphasizes that allocation should be avoided where possible. However, when unavoidable, the standard provides a hierarchy of preferred methods. The most preferred approach is to partition the input data or the distribution of the physical relationships of the systems. If this is not feasible, then allocation based on mass, energy, or other physical relationships is considered. In situations where a product system is a co-product of another system, and the primary product is not the focus of the EPD, the allocation should reflect the relationship between the co-products. For instance, if a facility produces both refined petroleum and asphalt, and the EPD is for asphalt, the environmental burdens associated with the petroleum refining process need to be allocated between the petroleum and the asphalt. Common method for this allocation, when physical relationships are not directly applicable or sufficient, is to allocate based on the economic value of the products, provided this reflects the underlying resource consumption. However, the standard prioritizes methods that reflect the physical relationships or the contribution to the function of the product system. Therefore, when a product is a co-product of another, and the EPD is for one of the co-products, the allocation of environmental burdens should ideally be based on physical relationships or the functional contribution of each co-product to the overall system, rather than solely on economic value, although economic value can be a secondary consideration if other methods are not viable. The scenario describes a situation where a material is a co-product of a primary manufacturing process. The EPD is for this co-product. To ensure a fair and representative allocation of the environmental burdens of the primary manufacturing process, the method should reflect the physical contribution of the co-product to the overall system. Allocating solely based on mass, without considering the energy content or functional equivalence, might not accurately represent the resource consumption attributable to the co-product. Similarly, allocating based on economic value alone, without considering the physical or functional aspects, can be misleading, especially if market prices fluctuate significantly or do not correlate with resource intensity. The most robust approach, aligning with ISO 14027, 2019's guidance on avoiding allocation where possible and using physical relationships when necessary, is to allocate based on the physical relationship between the co-products, which often involves considering factors like energy content or mass if they directly reflect resource utilization. In this specific case, where the co-product is a byproduct of a process with a primary output, and the EPD is for the co-product, the allocation should reflect the proportion of resources consumed that directly contribute to the co-product's existence or production, often best represented by physical relationships or a combined approach that acknowledges the shared nature of the production process. The question asks for the most appropriate method for allocating environmental burden when a product is a co-product. The explanation details that ISO 14027, 2019, in line with LCA standards, prioritizes methods that avoid allocation. When unavoidable, it suggests partitioning based on physical relationships or the distribution of the system's inputs and outputs. If these are not feasible, allocation based on mass, energy, or other physical relationships is recommended. Economic allocation is generally considered a last resort. Therefore, the most appropriate method would be one that reflects the physical contribution of the co-product to the overall production process, which can be represented by mass, energy content, or other relevant physical parameters that indicate the extent to which the co-product utilizes the resources of the shared system. Question 5. When constructing an environmental product declaration, EPD, for a novel composite material intended for aerospace applications, what fundamental aspect of the life cycle inventory, LCI, phase, as guided by ISO 14027, 2019, demands the most rigorous attention to ensure the declaration's credibility and comparability with existing materials, considering the potential for proprietary manufacturing processes? Option A. The detailed calculation of all potential ecotoxicity impacts, even those not directly measured or modeled in the initial inventory, to provide a more holistic environmental assessment. Option B. The selection of a single, universally accepted impact assessment method without regard to regional regulatory frameworks or the specific environmental concerns of the aerospace industry. Option C. The exclusive reliance on publicly available secondary data to simplify the data collection process and reduce the burden on the manufacturing entity. Option D. The comprehensive documentation and justification of all primary and secondary data sources, including their age, geographical relevance, and technological representativeness, to ensure transparency and support verification. The correct answer is D. The comprehensive documentation and justification of all primary and secondary data sources, including their age, geographical relevance, and technological representativeness, to ensure transparency and support verification. Explanation: the development of an environmental product declaration, EPD, under ISO 14027, 2019, necessitates a robust life cycle inventory, LCI analysis. The LCI is the data gathering and measurement phase of the life cycle assessment, LCA, process, which forms the foundation of the EPD. It involves quantifying all relevant inputs of energy and materials, and all relevant outputs to the environment. This includes emissions to air, water, and land, as well as other environmental impacts. ISO 14027, 2019 emphasizes the importance of data quality and transparency in the LCI. For Type Roman III environmental declaration, which an EPD is, the LCI data must be collected in accordance with the principles of ISO 14044, which outlines the requirements for conducting an LCA. Specifically, The standard requires that the LCI data be representative of the product system, and that the methodology for data collection and aggregation be clearly documented. The selection of appropriate data sources, whether primary or secondary, is crucial. Primary data, collected directly from the manufacturing process or use phase, is generally preferred for its relevance and accuracy. However, when primary data is not feasible or available, secondary data from reputable databases and literature can be used, provided it is carefully assessed for its applicability and quality. The transparency requirement means that all assumptions made, data sources used, and any limitations encountered during the LCI phase must be clearly stated in the EPD. This allows for the verification and understanding of the environmental profile of the product by stakeholders. The LCI forms the basis for the subsequent life cycle impact assessment, LCIA, which translates the inventory data into potential environmental impacts. Therefore, the rigor and accuracy of the LCI directly influence the credibility and reliability of the entire EPD. Question 6. Considering the framework established by ISO 14027-2019 for the development of environmental product declarations, what core attributes must an independent third-party verifier demonstrably possess to ensure the integrity and accuracy of an EPD for a complex industrial composite material? Option A. Profound knowledge of LCA methodologies, the specific product category rules for composite materials, ISO 14025, and relevant chemical safety regulations pertaining to industrial inputs. Option B. Expertise in material science research and development, coupled with a certification in quality management systems, without specific emphasis on LCA or EPD standards. Option C. Extensive experience in marketing environmental claims and a general understanding of product life cycles, with a focus on consumer-facing communication strategies. Option D. A strong background in financial auditing and a basic familiarity with environmental management systems, prioritizing cost-effectiveness in the verification process. The correct answer is A. Profound knowledge of LCA methodologies, the specific product category rules for composite materials, ISO 14025, and relevant chemical safety regulations pertaining to industrial inputs. Explanation: ISO 14027-2019 provides guidance on the development of environmental product declarations, EPD. A crucial aspect of ensuring the credibility and reliability of an EPD is the competence of the verifier. The standard emphasizes that verification should be conducted by an independent third party possessing the necessary expertise. This expertise encompasses a thorough understanding of the principles of life cycle assessment, LCA, the specific product category rules, PCR, applicable to the product being declared, the requirements of ISO 14025, which specifies the principles and procedures for Type I, Type Roman II, and Type Roman III environmental declarations, and the relevant environmental legislation and standards. The verifier must also demonstrate impartiality and ethical conduct. Their competence is typically established through a combination of formal education, relevant professional experience in environmental management, or LCA, and potentially specific training or certification in EPD verification. The goal is to ensure that the EPD accurately reflects the environmental performance of the product based on a sound and transparent methodology, free from bias. This rigorous verification process underpins the trust that stakeholders place in EPDs as a tool for communicating environmental information. Question 7. When developing an environmental product declaration, EPD, in accordance with ISO 14027-2019 guidelines, what is the fundamental prerequisite that underpins the entire life cycle assessment, LCA, and ensures the comparability of EPDs for similar products? Option A. The independent verification of the EPD by a qualified third-party certifier prior to its initial publication. Option B. The establishment of a clearly defined functional unit or declared unit and the precise delineation of system boundaries for the life cycle assessment. Option C. The selection of the most environmentally benign raw materials and manufacturing processes available for the product. Option D. The comprehensive market analysis to identify the primary target audience and their specific environmental information needs. The correct answer is B. The establishment of a clearly defined functional unit or declared unit and the precise delineation of system boundaries for the life cycle assessment. Explanation: the development of an Environmental Product Declaration, EPD, under ISO 14027, 2019 involves a structured, multi-stage process designed to ensure transparency, accuracy, and comparability of environmental information. The initial phase is crucial for defining the scope and objectives of the EPD. This includes identifying the product or service category, establishing the functional unit or declared unit, and determining the system boundaries for the life cycle assessment, LCA. Following this, a comprehensive LCA is conducted to quantify the potential environmental impacts associated with the product's entire life cycle, from raw material extraction to end-of-life disposal. The results of the LCA are then compiled and verified by an independent third party, ensuring compliance with the relevant product category rules, PCR, and ISO 14025 standards. Finally, the verified EPD is published, making the environmental performance data accessible to stakeholders. The process emphasizes the importance of a clearly defined functional unit and system boundaries to ensure that EPDs for similar products are comparable. This rigorous approach underpins the credibility and utility of EPDs in supporting informed purchasing decisions and driving environmental improvements within supply chains. Question 8. Consider a multinational manufacturing firm aiming to develop an Environmental Product Declaration, EPD, for its new line of composite building materials. The firm has conducted a comprehensive life cycle assessment, LCA, according to ISO 14044, but the specific product category rules, PCR, for composite building materials have not yet been formally established or adopted by a recognized program operator. According to the principles outlined in the ISO 14020 series, particularly as elaborated in ISO 14027, 2019, what is the indispensable prerequisite for the creation of a credible and comparable EPD for this product? Option A. The formal establishment and adherence to a recognized product category rule, PCR, specifically developed for the composite building materials sector. Option B. The direct translation of the ISO 14044 LCA results into a generic environmental performance statement without specific product category context. Option C. The exclusive use of data generated from pilot studies conducted within the manufacturing firm's own facilities, regardless of external validation. Option D. The completion of a detailed environmental impact assessment for each individual product variant within the new line, independent of any overarching category rules. The correct answer is A. The formal establishment and adherence to a recognized product category rule, PCR, specifically developed for the composite building materials sector. Explanation: the question probes the foundational principles guiding the development of environmental product declarations, EPD, under the ISO 14020 series, specifically referencing ISO 14027, 2019. The core of ISO 14027 is to provide guidelines for the development of EPDs, which are based on life cycle assessment, LCA data. This standard emphasizes transparency, comparability, and scientific rigor. A critical aspect of developing an EPD is establishing the product category rules, PCR, that define the specific parameters and methodologies for conducting the LCA for a particular product group. ISO 14027, in conjunction with ISO 14040 and ISO 14044, which detail LCA principles and framework, mandates that EPDs be based on robust, verified data and adhere to established PCRs. The concept of a product category is central, as it ensures that EPDs for similar products are developed using consistent methodologies, thereby enabling meaningful comparisons. The standard also highlights the importance of third-party verification to ensure the accuracy and credibility of the EPD. Therefore, the most accurate response centers on the necessity of adhering to established product category rules for the development of EPDs, ensuring comparability and scientific validity in line with the ISO 14020 series. Question 9. A manufacturing firm is preparing to publish an Environmental Product Declaration, EPD, for a novel bio-based insulation product. To ensure the integrity and credibility of their EPD, what foundational approach to data collection and management, as guided by ISO 14027, 2019, should be prioritized from the outset of the project to address potential data gaps and ensure representativeness across the product's life cycle. Option A. Focus exclusively on the manufacturing stage data, as this is the most controllable aspect of the product's life cycle for the company. Option B. Implement a retroactive data validation system only after all data has been collected to identify and rectify any inconsistencies or errors. Option C. Rely primarily on publicly available secondary data sources to expedite the data collection phase, with minimal primary data collection from internal operations. Option D. Establish a comprehensive data management plan that defines data requirements, collection methodologies, validation protocols, and procedures for handling data uncertainties and gaps throughout the EPD development process. Correct answer is D. Establish a comprehensive data management plan that defines data requirements, collection methodologies, validation protocols, and procedures for handling data uncertainties and gaps throughout the EPD development process. Explanation: ISO 14027, 2019 emphasizes the critical role of robust data collection and management for developing credible environmental product declarations. EPD. The standard outlines principles for ensuring data quality, relevance, and representativeness throughout the lifecycle assessment (LCA) process. This includes defining clear data requirements, establishing procedures for data acquisition, and implementing validation mechanisms. For a company developing an EPD for a new composite building material, adherence to these guidelines is paramount. The chosen approach must facilitate the systematic gathering of data across all relevant life cycle stages, from raw material extraction to end-of-life treatment. This involves identifying appropriate data sources, whether primary, from the company's own operations, or secondary, from databases and literature. Furthermore, the management of this data must ensure its integrity, traceability, and consistency, allowing for verification and auditing. A key consideration is the potential for data gaps or uncertainties, and the standard provides guidance on how to address these through sensitivity analysis and scenario modeling. The overall objective is to produce an EPD that is transparent, reliable, and provides meaningful environmental information to stakeholders, aligning with the principles of ISO 14020 and supporting informed decision-making. The most effective strategy would integrate data management from the initial planning phase, ensuring that data collection aligns with the specific requirements of the EPD and the chosen LCA methodology, thereby minimizing rework and enhancing the overall credibility of the declaration. Question 10. A manufacturer is developing an environmental product declaration, EPD, for a new model of industrial water pump. A significant portion of the product's environmental footprint is anticipated to stem from its operational energy consumption. According to the principles outlined in ISO 14027, 2019, what is the most crucial element to ensure the accuracy and credibility of the EPD concerning this energy usage? Option A. A comparison of the pump's energy consumption with that of its closest competitor, highlighting any minor improvements in operational efficiency. Option B. Rigorous quantification of energy inputs and associated environmental burdens throughout the product's life cycle, based on a comprehensive life cycle assessment adhering to relevant product category rules or ISO 14040/14044. Option C. A qualitative description of the pump's energy efficiency features and a general statement about the importance of reducing energy consumption in industrial processes. Option D. The inclusion of a disclaimer stating that actual energy consumption may vary significantly depending on the specific installation and operational conditions. The correct answer is B. Rigorous quantification of energy inputs and associated environmental burdens throughout the product's life cycle, based on a comprehensive life cycle assessment adhering to relevant product category rules or ISO 14040/14044. Explanation: the core principle of ISO 14027, 2019 regarding the development of environmental product declarations (EPD) is to ensure transparency, comparability, and accuracy of environmental information. When developing an EPD for a product with significant energy consumption during its use phase, such as an industrial pump, the standard mandates a comprehensive life cycle assessment, LCA. This LCA must quantify all relevant environmental impacts, including those associated with energy generation and consumption. The standard emphasizes the importance of clearly defining the system boundaries and functional unit for the LCA. For energy consumption, this involves accounting for the energy source e.g., grid electricity, on-site generation, the efficiency of energy conversion, and the emissions associated with energy production and use. ISO 14027, 2019 directs users to relevant product category rules, PCR, for specific guidance on impact categories and methodologies. If a specific PCR is not available for the industrial pump, the developer must follow the general principles outlined in ISO 14040 and ISO 14044 for conducting the LCA. The energy consumption data collected must be robust and representative of typical use. The resulting EPD should clearly communicate the energy-related environmental impacts, allowing consumers and businesses to make informed choices. The standard also requires that the data used in the EPD be verifiable and that the methodology be transparent. Therefore, the most critical aspect for an EPD concerning energy use is the accurate and comprehensive quantification of energy inputs and their associated environmental burdens throughout the product's life cycle, as dictated by the LCA conducted according to established standards and relevant PCRs. Question 11. A manufacturing firm is developing an environmental product declaration for a new line of biodegradable cleaning agents. They have conducted a comprehensive life cycle assessment according to a specific product category rule, PCR, that aligns with ISO 14020 series standards. The PCR mandates the inclusion of all key life cycle stages and specific environmental impact indicators related to ecotoxicity and human toxicity. However, the firm also possesses detailed data on the product's end-of-life management practices, including collection rates and recycling efficiencies for the packaging, which are not explicitly required by the PCR, but are considered beneficial for stakeholders. According to the principles of ISO 14027-2019, how should this additional packaging management data be categorized within the EPD? Option A, as mandatory information as it relates to the product's end of life, a critical life cycle stage. Option B, as irrelevant information since it is not explicitly mandated by the PCR. Option C, as a revision to the PCR requiring a formal amendment before inclusion. Option D, as optional information providing supplementary detail beyond the PCR's mandatory requirements. Correct answer is D, as optional information providing supplementary detail beyond the PCR's mandatory requirements. Explanation: ISO 14027, 2019, which provides guidelines for the development of environmental product declarations, EPD, distinguishes between mandatory and optional information elements. The core principle is to ensure transparency and comparability of environmental information. Mandatory elements are those essential for a credible and understandable EPD, providing the foundational data and context. These typically include details about the product or service, the organization developing the EPD, the relevant product category rules (PCR) used, the life cycle assessment (LCA) methodology applied, and the resulting environmental impact data presented in a standardized format. Optional elements, conversely, are supplementary information that can enhance the EPD's utility, but are not strictly required for its fundamental validity. These might include additional impact categories beyond the core requirements of the PCR, specific usage instructions, or information related to social or economic aspects not directly covered by the primary environmental assessment. The standard emphasizes that the specific mandatory and optional elements are often dictated by the applicable PCR, which itself must adhere to the principles outlined in ISO 14020 series standards. Therefore, understanding the PCR is paramount to correctly identifying what information must be included versus what can be added. Question 12. When developing an environmental product declaration, EPD, in accordance with ISO 14027, 2019, what fundamental principle governs the comprehensive documentation of all material and energy flows associated with each distinct process unit within the product's life cycle? Option A, documenting only the energy inputs and waste outputs, as these are considered the most critical environmental performance indicators. Option B, prioritizing the quantification of only those flows that are deemed to have a significant environmental impact, omitting minor contributions. Option C. Establishing a precise material and energy balance for each process unit by meticulously accounting for all incoming and outgoing elementary flows. Option D. Focusing solely on the primary raw material inputs and final product outputs, disregarding intermediate process flows. Correct answer is C. Establishing a precise material and energy balance for each process unit by meticulously accounting for all incoming and outgoing elementary flows. Explanation: the core principle of quantifying inputs and outputs for each process within an environmental product declaration (EPD) development, as guided by ISO 14027, 2019, involves a systematic approach to data collection and inventory analysis. This process necessitates the identification of all relevant elementary flows entering or leaving the system boundary of a specific product or service. For each identified process unit within the life cycle, it is crucial to document and quantify all material inputs, energy inputs, and environmental releases. This includes raw materials, auxiliary materials, water, and all forms of energy consumed. Similarly, all outputs such as finished products, co-products, waste materials, and emissions to air, water, and soil must be meticulously recorded. The objective is to establish a comprehensive material and energy balance for each process stage. For instance, in a manufacturing process, the inputs might include virgin plastic pellets, recycled plastic, electricity, and water. The outputs would then comprise the final molded product, scrap plastic for recycling, wastewater, and air emissions from machinery. The accuracy and completeness of this data are paramount for the credibility and reliability of the resulting EPD. This systematic quantification forms the foundation for the subsequent life cycle impact assessment and the communication of environmental information. Question 13. A manufacturing firm is developing an environmental product declaration, EPD, for a new composite building material. In addition to the core life cycle assessment data required by ISO 14027-2019, the firm wishes to include information regarding the material's recyclability and the availability of specialized recycling facilities in key markets. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the guidelines for providing additional environmental information under ISO 14027-2019? Option A. Detailing the specific recycling processes and identifying verified recycling partners in each target region, ensuring this information is presented as a supplementary section that clearly references the primary EPD data. Option B. Creating a separate, standalone document that elaborates on the recycling aspects, distinct from the main EPD, to maintain the conciseness of the primary declaration. Option C. Disclosing the precise chemical composition of the material to enable third-party recyclers to independently assess its recyclability, even if this level of detail is not explicitly required by the core EPD. Option D. Including a general statement about the product's potential for recycling without providing specific details on processes or facilities to avoid overpromising or creating liability. The correct answer is A. Detailing the specific recycling processes and identifying verified recycling partners in each target region, ensuring this information is presented as a supplementary section that clearly references the primary EPD data. Explanation: ISO 14027, 2019, which provides guidelines for the development of environmental product declarations, EPD, emphasizes the importance of providing additional environmental information beyond the core EPD data. This additional information serves to enhance the transparency and utility of the EPD for various stakeholders, including consumers, regulators, and procurement professionals. Such supplementary data can include details on the product's performance in use, end-of-life management options, or specific environmental certifications relevant to the product category. The standard guides organizations to ensure that any supplementary information is presented in a clear, verifiable, and non-misleading manner, aligning with the overall principles of environmental communication. It is crucial that this additional information complements, rather than contradicts or overshadows, the primary EPD data, thereby maintaining the integrity and focus of the declaration. The objective is to offer a more comprehensive understanding of a product's environmental profile without compromising the standardization and comparability that EPDs aim to achieve. This approach supports informed decision-making by providing context and practical guidance related to the product's life cycle. Question 14. When constructing an environmental product declaration, EPD, for a composite building material, a critical aspect involves quantifying its global warming potential, GWP. If the life cycle assessment identifies emissions of 7 kg of methane CH4 and 12 kg of nitrous oxide, N2O, and the relevant 100-year global warming potential values from the IPCC are 28 for CH4 and 265 for N2O, what is the total GWP of the material expressed in kilograms of carbon dioxide equivalent, kg CO2 ec? Option A, 3,684 kg CO2 ec. Option B, 3,024 kg CO2 ec. Option C, 3,384 kg CO2 ec. Option D, 3,144 kg CO2 ec. The correct answer is C, 3,384 kg CO2 ec. Explanation: the development of an environmental product declaration, EPD, under ISO 14027, 2019 requires a rigorous life cycle assessment, LCA. For the global warming potential, GWP impact category, the foundation is the IPCC assessment report, which provides the most current scientific consensus on the radiative forcing potential of greenhouse gases relative to carbon dioxide. The GWP values are time-dependent, meaning the impact of a gas can differ depending on the time horizon considered, e.g. 100-year GWP is most commonly used. When calculating the GWP of a product, all relevant greenhouse gases emitted throughout its life cycle, from raw material extraction to end-of-life disposal, must be identified and quantified. Each gas's emission quantity is then multiplied by its respective GWP factor to convert it into an equivalent amount of CO2. The sum of these values for all relevant greenhouse gases represents the total GWP of the product. For instance, if a product emits 5 kg of methane, CH4, and 10 kg of nitrous oxide, N2O, over its life cycle, and the 100-year GWP for CH4 is 28 and for N2O is 265, as per IPCC R5, the total GWP would be calculated as /5 kg CH4 times 28 plus 10 text kg into text O times 265 equals 140 text kg code U text ec plus 2650 text kg code U text ec equals 2790 text kg code U text ec /. This calculation is crucial for ensuring the comparability and accuracy of EPDs, adhering to the principles of ISO 14027, 2019, which emphasizes transparency and reliability in environmental information. The choice of GWP time horizon is a critical parameter that must be clearly stated in the EPD. Question 15. A manufacturing firm specializing in sustainable building materials is developing an environmental product declaration, EPD, for its innovative insulation product. They are also considering obtaining a Type I environmental label for the same product to enhance market appeal. Considering the principles outlined in ISO 14027, 2019, regarding the development of EPDs and the broader framework of environmental labeling standards like ISO 14024 and ISO 14021, how does the fundamental purpose and information conveyed by an EPD typically differ from that of a Type I environmental label? Option A. Type I labels are based on self-declared claims verified by the manufacturer, whereas EPDs require rigorous third-party verification of all declared data. Option B. EPDs provide quantified, life cycle-based environmental data across multiple impact categories, whereas Type I labels offer a holistic, third-party certified assessment of a product's overall environmental performance relative to a benchmark. Option C. EPDs are exclusively for business-to-business communication, while Type I labels are designed for direct consumer engagement and purchasing decisions. Option D. EPDs focus on a single environmental attribute of a product, such as energy efficiency, while Type I labels encompass the entire life cycle environmental impact. The correct answer is B. EPDs provide quantified life cycle-based environmental data across multiple impact categories, whereas Type I labels offer a holistic, third-party certified assessment of a product's overall environmental performance relative to a benchmark. Explanation: ISO 14027, 2019, concerning the development of environmental product declarations, EPD, emphasizes a transparent and credible approach to communicating a product's environmental performance. While EPDs are a specific type of environmental declaration, they are distinct from other environmental labels and claims. Type I environmental labels, as defined in ISO 14024, are voluntary, third-party certified programs that assess a product's overall environmental performance based on a life cycle perspective and set criteria. Type III environmental declarations, which EPDs fall under, are also voluntary and provide quantified environmental information based on life cycle assessment, LCA data, communicated through pre-established parameters, and without necessarily implying overall environmental superiority or a comparative claim. Type II, self-declared environmental claims, governed by ISO 14021, are made by manufacturers, importers, or distributors without third-party verification and should be substantiated by the company. Therefore, an EPD, being a Type III declaration, is fundamentally different from the holistic, single-attribute, or overall environmental performance assessment often associated with Type I labels. The primary distinction lies in the nature of the information conveyed. EPDs provide quantitative data across various impact categories, whereas Type I labels offer a simplified, certified indication of a product's environmental merit relative to a benchmark or category. This aligns with the principle that EPDs are designed to be informative and verifiable, not necessarily to serve as a direct comparative marketing tool like some Type I labels might. The relationship is one of complementarity and differentiation, where EPDs provide the underlying data that could potentially inform or be referenced by other types of environmental claims or labels, but they are not interchangeable. Question 16. A manufacturer developing an environmental product declaration, EPD, for a new composite building material, following the guidelines of ISO 14027-2019, has conducted a comprehensive life cycle impact assessment, LCIA. The LCIA results indicate a particularly high eutrophication potential, primarily stemming from the raw material extraction and manufacturing phases. Considering the standard's emphasis on transparency and the accurate representation of environmental performance, what is the most appropriate course of action for the EPD developer regarding this finding? Option A. Provide a general qualitative statement about potential environmental impacts without detailing the specific findings related to eutrophication potential. Option B. Clearly quantify and report the eutrophication potential within the EPD, providing context on the contributing life cycle stages and the methodology used for its assessment. Option C. Downplay the eutrophication potential by focusing the EPD's narrative on other, less significant, environmental impact categories. Option D. Omit any specific mention of eutrophication potential from the EPD, assuming that stakeholders will not focus on this particular aspect. The correct answer is B. Clearly quantify and report the eutrophication potential within the EPD, providing context on the contributing life cycle stages and the methodology used for its assessment. Explanation: the core principle of ISO 14027, 2019 concerning the development of environmental product declarations, EPD, is to ensure that the information presented is scientifically sound, verifiable, and relevant to the product's life cycle environmental performance. When a product's life cycle impact assessment, LCIA, reveals significant environmental burdens in a particular category, such as eutrophication potential, the EPD developer must address this within the declaration. The standard emphasizes transparency and comparability. Therefore, the most appropriate action, aligning with the principles of ISO 14027, is to ensure that the specific impact category identified as significant is clearly communicated and quantified within the EPD, along with any relevant assumptions or methodologies used in its calculation. This allows stakeholders to understand the product's environmental profile comprehensively. Other actions, such as solely focusing on a different impact category without adequately addressing the identified significant one, or making qualitative statements without supporting data, would not fulfill the standard's requirements for a robust and informative EPD. The goal is to provide a complete and accurate picture of the product's environmental performance across its life cycle, highlighting areas of concern and providing the necessary context. Question 17. Consider a scenario where a manufacturing firm is developing an environmental product declaration, EPD, for a new type of biodegradable packaging. The firm intends to highlight the reduced end-of-life impacts of their product compared to conventional plastics. To ensure the EPD accurately reflects the product's environmental performance and aligns with the principles outlined in ISO 14027, 2019, for developing such declarations, which fundamental aspect of the life cycle assessment, LCA, methodology must be meticulously defined to guide the entire study, from data collection to impact assessment, and to ensure the declared environmental information is relevant and credible for the intended audience. Option A. The prioritization of qualitative environmental descriptors over quantitative data, focusing solely on consumer perception of biodegradability without rigorous scientific validation. Option B. The detailed breakdown of all potential indirect environmental impacts, even those occurring in life cycle stages explicitly excluded from the defined system boundaries. Option C. The precise definition of the goal and scope of the LCA, including system boundaries, functional unit, and impact categories relevant to the declared environmental claims. Option D. The selection of specific software tools and databases for conducting the LCA, prioritizing those with the most extensive databases, regardless of relevance to the product's life cycle. Correct answer is C. The precise definition of the goal and scope of the LCA, including system boundaries, functional unit, and impact categories relevant to the declared environmental claims. Explanation. The question probes the understanding of how the scope of a life cycle assessment, LCA, directly influences the selection of data and the subsequent interpretation of results, as guided by ISO 14027, 2019. The standard emphasizes that the goal and scope definition is a foundational step in LCA, dictating the boundaries of the system under study, including the life cycle stages, the product system, and the functional unit. A clearly defined scope ensures that the LCA is relevant to its intended audience and purpose. For instance, a cradle-to-grave assessment of a beverage container would include raw material extraction, manufacturing, distribution, use, and end of life, whereas a cradle-to-gate assessment would cease at the factory gate. The choice of scope directly impacts the types of environmental impacts considered and the data required for analysis. A broader scope generally necessitates more comprehensive data collection and can lead to a more complete understanding of the product's environmental footprint, but also increases complexity and cost. Conversely, a narrower scope might be more manageable, but could overlook significant impacts occurring outside its defined boundaries. ISO 14027, 2019, while providing guidelines for environmental product declarations, EPD, relies on robust LCA methodology as its foundation. The introduction to LCA methodology within the context of ISO 14027 highlights the critical role of scope definition in ensuring the credibility and comparability of EPDs. This includes defining the system boundaries, the functional unit, and the impact categories to be assessed, all of which are contingent upon the initial scope. The selection of relevant environmental impact categories, such as global warming potential or acidification potential, is also determined by the scope and the intended use of the EPD. Therefore, a well-defined scope is paramount for producing meaningful and reliable environmental information. Question 18. A manufacturer is developing an environmental product declaration, EPD, for a new air conditioning unit that uses a novel refrigerant blend. According to the principles outlined in ISO 14027, 2019, which of the following represents the most critical consideration regarding the ozone depletion potential of this refrigerant blend for inclusion in the EPD? Option A. The historical trend of ODP values for refrigerants used in similar products over the past decade. Option B. The availability of alternative refrigerants with lower global warming potential, irrespective of their ODP. Option C. The specific ODP value of the refrigerant blend and its contribution to the product's overall life cycle environmental profile. Option D. The perceived public awareness and concern regarding ozone depletion compared to other environmental issues. The correct answer is C. The the specific ODP value of the refrigerant blend, and its contribution to the product's overall life cycle environmental profile. Explanation: the development of an environmental product declaration, EPD, for a product that utilizes refrigerants requires careful consideration of various environmental impacts. ISO 14027, 2019, which provides guidelines for developing EPDs, emphasizes a life cycle perspective. Ozone depletion potential (OD) is a critical indicator of a substance's ability to deplete the stratospheric ozone layer. When assessing refrigerants, the ODP value is a primary factor. A refrigerant with a higher ODP contributes more significantly to ozone depletion. Therefore, in the context of an EPD, the selection and quantification of ODP are directly linked to the environmental performance of the product. The question asks to identify the most relevant aspect concerning ODP in an EPD for a product using refrigerants. Considering the principles of ISO 14027 and the nature of ODP, the most pertinent consideration is its direct impact on the ozone layer and its subsequent regulatory implications. This includes understanding the specific ODP value of the refrigerant used, as this forms the basis for reporting and comparison within the EPD. Choice of refrigerant with a low or zero ODP is a key design and environmental management decision that an EPD would highlight. The objective is to accurately represent the environmental footprint, and ODP is a quantifiable metric for ozone-related impacts. This aligns with the EPD's role in providing transparent and comparable environmental information to stakeholders, enabling informed decision-making regarding product sustainability. Question 19. An organization is preparing an environmental product declaration for a novel bio-based composite material intended for construction applications. They are debating whether to include the cultivation and harvesting of the biomass feedstock in the system boundary, as the specific agricultural practices vary significantly across potential suppliers and the environmental impacts, e.g., land use change, water consumption, fertilizer use, are highly site-specific. According to the principles outlined in ISO 14027, 2019, what is the most appropriate approach for defining the system boundary in this scenario, considering the need for transparency and comparability? Option A. Exclude the cultivation and harvesting of biomass entirely, focusing only on the manufacturing and end-of-life stages of the composite material itself. Option B. Include the cultivation and harvesting of biomass, clearly documenting the assumptions and data sources used for the varying agricultural practices, and acknowledging the potential variability in the final EPD. Option C. Include only the transportation of the harvested biomass to the manufacturing facility, omitting the agricultural production processes. Option D. Include the cultivation and harvesting of biomass but use generic, average data for all agricultural practices globally to simplify the assessment. The correct answer is B. Include the cultivation and harvesting of biomass, clearly documenting the assumptions and data sources used for the varying agricultural practices and acknowledging the potential variability in the final EPD. Explanation: when developing an environmental product declaration, EPD, according to ISO 14027, 2019, defining the system boundary is a critical step that dictates the scope of the life cycle assessment, LCA. The standard emphasizes that the system boundary should encompass all relevant environmental inputs, outputs, and potential environmental impacts associated with a product's life cycle, from raw material extraction to end-of-life treatment. This includes considering all unit processes necessary to bring the product from its earliest feasible origin to its final disposal or recovery. For instance, in the case of a manufactured good, this would typically involve raw material acquisition, manufacturing, distribution, use, and disposal. However, the specific inclusion or exclusion of certain life cycle stages or processes must be justified based on materiality and relevance to the product category rules, PCR, and the intended use of the EPD. For example, if the use phase of a product is negligible in terms of environmental impact compared to other stages, it might be excluded after a thorough justification, but this exclusion must be clearly documented. The primary goal is to ensure that the EPD provides a comprehensive and credible representation of the product's environmental performance, allowing for fair comparison between products that perform the same function. The boundary setting is iterative and may be refined as the LCA progresses and data availability is assessed. The standard requires transparency in reporting the defined system boundary and any exclusions made. Question 20. Consider a regional government initiative aiming to promote the adoption of construction materials with reduced embodied carbon. The government is developing procurement guidelines that mandate the consideration of environmental performance data. Which of the following outcomes most directly aligns with the intended benefits of utilizing environmental product declarations, EPD, developed according to ISO 14027, 2019 within this procurement framework? Option A. Serving as a marketing tool for manufacturers to highlight unique product features, irrespective of their verifiable environmental performance data or life cycle considerations. Option B. Providing a simplified eco-label that guarantees a product is entirely free from any negative environmental consequences across all potential impact categories. Option C. Offering a comprehensive list of all possible environmental hazards associated with a product, without a structured framework for comparison or quantification of impacts. Option D. Enabling public sector buyers to quantitatively compare the life cycle environmental impacts of different construction materials, thereby influencing purchasing choices towards lower impact options and stimulating market demand for sustainable building products. Correct answer is D. Enabling public sector buyers to quantitatively compare the life cycle environmental impacts of different construction materials, thereby influencing purchasing choices towards lower impact options and stimulating market demand for sustainable building products. Explanation. The core purpose of an environmental product declaration, EPDA as guided by ISO 14027-2019, is to provide transparent, credible, and comparable environmental information about a product or service throughout its life cycle. This information is generated through a life cycle assessment, LCA, and verified by a third party. The primary benefit derived from such a declaration is the facilitation of informed purchasing decisions by consumers and business-to-business procurement. EPDs empower stakeholders to select products with lower environmental impacts, thereby driving market demand for more sustainable goods and services. This, in turn, encourages manufacturers to innovate and improve their environmental performance to gain a competitive advantage. Furthermore, EPDs support environmental management systems, contribute to green building certifications, and can be used to comply with regulatory requirements or public procurement policies that favor environmentally preferable products. The objective is not to declare a product as environmentally friendly in a simplistic sense, but rather to quantify its environmental footprint across defined impact categories, allowing for a nuanced comparison. The transparency and comparability are key to achieving these benefits, as they build trust and enable meaningful evaluation. Question 21. Which statement most accurately describes the fundamental objective of the third-party verification process for an environmental product declaration, EPD, as guided by ISO 14027-2019, ensuring its utility in business-to-business communication? Option A. To validate that the EPD exclusively highlights the most favorable environmental aspects of the product, ensuring it presents a compelling case for procurement by business customers. Option B. To provide a simplified summary of the EPD's findings, focusing solely on the key environmental indicators to expedite the decision-making process for potential business purchasers. Option C. To conduct an independent recalculation of the entire life cycle assessment, LCA, to identify potential optimizations in the product's environmental footprint that were missed by the original developer. Option D. To confirm that the EPD and its underlying data conform to the requirements of the relevant product category rules, PCR, and ISO 14025, thereby assuring the accuracy, transparency, and credibility of the declared environmental information for business-to-business stakeholders. The correct answer is D. To confirm that the EPD and its underlying data conform to the requirements of the relevant product category rules, PCR, and ISO 14025, thereby assuring the accuracy, transparency, and credibility of the declared environmental information for business-to-business stakeholders. Explanation. ISO 14027, 2019 emphasizes the importance of a robust verification process for environmental product declarations, EPD, to ensure their credibility and comparability. Verification under this standard involves an independent third-party assessment of the EPD and its underlying data against the requirements of the relevant product category rules, PCR, and ISO 14025. The primary objective is to confirm that the EPD accurately reflects the environmental performance of the product throughout its life cycle, based on the established PCR, and that the data is sound and the calculations are correct. This includes checking the data quality, the consistency of the life cycle assessment, LCA methodology, the compliance with the PCR's specific requirements, and the overall presentation of information in the EPD. The verifier's role is not to reperform the LCA, but to critically review the documented evidence and the EPD's conformity. A key aspect of this verification is ensuring that the EPD is free from misleading claims, and that the environmental information presented is transparent and understandable to the intended audience, such as business-to-business purchasers. The verification statement issued by the third-party verifier is a critical component of the EPD, providing assurance to stakeholders about its reliability. The standard outlines that the verification should cover the entire EPD document, including the LCA results, the interpretation of these results, and any additional environmental information provided. This rigorous process underpins the trust placed in EPDs as a tool for communicating environmental performance. Question 22. A consortium of manufacturers is developing a new product category rule, PCR, for a bio-based insulation material intended for both residential construction and automotive interior applications. They anticipate significant market interest in both the European Union and North America. To maximize the utility and comparability of the resulting EPDs, what strategic approach should the consortium prioritize to achieve effective PCR harmonization across these diverse regions and sectors, considering potential regulatory landscapes like REACH and TSCA? Option A. Directly adopt an established PCR from a similar product category in one region, making minimal adjustments for the other to expedite the development timeline. Option B. Prioritize the development of a PCR that exclusively meets the most stringent regulatory requirements of one target region, assuming this will be sufficient for the other. Option C. Develop a completely novel PCR from scratch, focusing solely on the unique characteristics of the bio-based material without referencing existing frameworks. Option D. Initiate a collaborative process with existing PCR developers and relevant industry bodies in both the EU and North America to identify commonalities and align methodologies with internationally recognized standards. Correct answer is D. Initiate a collaborative process with existing PCR developers and relevant industry bodies in both the EU and North America to identify commonalities and align methodologies with internationally recognized standards. Explanation: ISO 14027, 2019, which provides guidelines for the development of environmental product declarations, EPD, emphasizes the importance of consistency and comparability. Harmonizing product category rules, PCR, across different geographical regions and industry sectors is a critical aspect of achieving this goal. Harmonization aims to reduce redundancy in PCR development, enhance the credibility of EPDs by ensuring a common methodological basis, and facilitate market access for products with EPDs. And considering the development of a new PCR for a composite material used in both construction and automotive sectors, and with potential market adoption in the European Union and North America, the most effective approach to foster harmonization involves a multi-stakeholder process that actively seeks alignment with existing, internationally recognized PCRs or frameworks. This includes engaging with existing PCR providers, industry associations, and regulatory bodies in both target regions. The goal is to identify common environmental impact assessment methodologies, system boundary definitions, and data quality requirements. This collaborative effort, often facilitated through international standards development organizations or sector-specific working groups, allows for the integration of regional nuances while maintaining a core set of principles that promote comparability. Direct adoption of an existing PCR without critical evaluation for regional applicability or sector-specific needs could lead to inaccuracies or non-compliance with local regulations, such as REACH in the EU or TSCA in the US, which govern chemical substances and their environmental impact. Similarly, developing a completely new PCR in isolation would negate the benefits of harmonization and likely lead to a lack of comparability with EPDs for similar products developed elsewhere. Focusing solely on one region's requirements would also limit the potential for global market acceptance. Therefore, a proactive and collaborative approach to align with existing frameworks and engage relevant stakeholders is paramount for successful PCR harmonization. Question 23. When developing an environmental product declaration, EPD, for new composite building material, which primary target audience, as guided by ISO 14027-2019, would most critically require information presented in a manner that facilitates direct comparison with similar products to inform purchasing decisions within a regulated procurement framework? Option A. Procurement officers in public sector organizations implementing green public procurement policies. Option B. Product designers seeking to identify specific impact categories for internal product improvement. Option C. Environmental researchers analyzing the full life cycle inventory data for academic publication. Option D. Material scientists verifying the robustness of the underlying life cycle assessment methodology. The correct answer is A. Procurement officers in public sector organizations implementing green public procurement policies. Explanation: ISO 14027-2019, concerning environmental labels and declarations, outlines guidelines for developing environmental product declarations, EPD. A core principle is the identification and understanding of the intended audience for an EPD. Different stakeholders possess varying levels of technical expertise and require information tailored to their specific needs and decision-making processes. For instance, procurement officers in government agencies or large corporations often need concise, comparable data to inform purchasing decisions, focusing on the environmental performance of products within a specific category. These individuals may not have deep scientific backgrounds, but are responsible for implementing environmental policies and regulations, such as those mandated by national or regional green public procurement (GPP) frameworks. Conversely, product developers or environmental consultants might require more detailed life cycle assessment (LCA) data and underlying assumptions to verify EPD content, identify areas for product improvement, or conduct comparative assertions. Researchers and academics would seek the most granular data for analysis and validation. Therefore, the EPD development process must consider how to effectively communicate complex environmental information to these diverse groups, ensuring clarity, comparability, and credibility without overwhelming less technical audiences or withholding necessary detail from more specialized ones. The standard emphasizes that the EPD should be accessible and understandable to its primary intended audiences, facilitating informed decision-making regarding environmental performance. Question 24. A manufacturing firm developing an environmental product declaration for its new line of biodegradable packaging materials discovers that the primary data collected for the agricultural inputs used in the bioplastic production exhibits significant variability and lacks detailed process specifics. According to ISO 14027-2019 guidelines on data quality assessment and improvement, what is the most appropriate immediate course of action to address this data deficiency? Option A. Implement targeted data collection or refinement processes to improve the accuracy and representativeness of the primary data for agricultural inputs. Option B. Proceed with the EPD using the existing variable primary data, assuming that the overall impact of this phase is minor. Option C. Exclude the agricultural input phase entirely from the EPD to avoid presenting potentially misleading information. Option D. Substitute the variable primary data with general industry averages for bioplastic production, citing a lack of specific data. The correct answer is A. Implement targeted data collection or refinement processes to improve the accuracy and representativeness of the primary data for agricultural inputs. Explanation: the core principle of ISO 14027-2019 regarding data quality for environmental product declarations, EPD, is to ensure that the data used is robust, reliable, and representative of the product's life cycle. This involves a systematic assessment and, where necessary, improvement of the data's fitness for purpose. Data quality is typically evaluated based on criteria such as accuracy, completeness, consistency, representativeness, and reproducibility. When data is found to be insufficient, the standard encourages the application of specific improvement strategies. These strategies are aimed at enhancing the data's credibility and reducing uncertainty. For instance, if primary data is unavailable or of poor quality, the guideline suggests exploring the use of secondary data from reputable databases or industry averages, provided that appropriate justification and documentation are maintained. However, the critical aspect is not merely replacing data, but ensuring that any replacement or supplementation adheres to the same rigorous quality standards and is transparently reported. The emphasis is on a continuous cycle of assessment and improvement, rather than a one-time check. This proactive approach is essential for the overall integrity and comparability of EPDs, enabling stakeholders to make informed decisions. Therefore, when data quality is identified as a concern, the immediate and most appropriate action, as per the standard's intent, is to identify and implement specific measures to enhance that data's reliability and representativeness, rather than simply discarding the EPD or relying solely on generic assumptions without targeted improvement efforts. Question 25. A company in the European Union is preparing to launch a new type of composite wood panel and intends to create an environmental product declaration, EPD, for it. They have identified that no specific product category rules, PCR, currently exist for this novel composite material within the EU regulatory framework. According to the principles and guidelines set forth in ISO 14027-2019, what is the most critical initial step the company must undertake to ensure the validity and comparability of its forthcoming EPD? Option A. Initiate the development and adoption of a specific product category rule, PCR, for their composite wood panel, involving relevant stakeholders and third-party verification. Option B. Commission a comprehensive market research study to determine the perceived environmental benefits of their product before developing any EPD documentation. Option C. Adopt the PCRs established for a closely related but distinct product category, such as standard plywood, and clearly state this deviation in the EPD. Option D. Directly proceed with conducting a life cycle assessment, LCA, based on general environmental management principles and submit it for third-party verification. Correct answer is A. Initiate the development and adoption of a specific product category rule, PCR, for their composite wood panel, involving relevant stakeholders and third-party verification. Explanation: ISO 14027-2019, which provides guidelines for developing environmental product declarations, EPD, emphasizes the importance of transparency and comparability. A core principle is the use of a Type Roman III environmental declaration system, which relies on objective, third-party verified data. The standard outlines the necessity for a product category rules, PCR, document to ensure consistency in the life cycle assessment, LCA methodology applied to similar products. When a manufacturer develops an EPD for a new composite wood panel, adhering to ISO 14027 means they must first identify or develop relevant PCRs. These PCRs dictate the specific LCA methodology, system boundaries, impact categories, and data requirements for that product category. Without established PCRs, the manufacturer would need to initiate the process of creating them, often involving a multi-stakeholder consultation to define the rules for assessing environmental performance. This ensures that the EPD is robust, credible, and comparable to other EPDs for similar products, facilitating informed decision-making by purchasers and specifiers. The verification by an independent third party is a critical step to validate the accuracy and adherence to the PCR and the ISO standards. Question 26. When developing an environmental product declaration, EPD, for a novel bioplastic packaging material under ISO 14027-2019, what fundamental principle dictates the inclusion and quantification of specific emissions to air, water, and soil? Option A. The significance of these emissions as identified through a comprehensive life cycle assessment, aligning with ISO 14040 and ISO 14044, and their relevance to the product's environmental profile. Option B. The availability of data for these emissions, prioritizing those with readily accessible measurement techniques, even if they represent minor environmental contributions. Option C. the marketing department's preference for highlighting specific environmental benefits, focusing on emissions that present the most favorable comparative advantage. Option D, the regulatory limits set by the country of manufacture for each emission type, regardless of their contribution to the product's overall environmental impact. The correct answer is A, the significance of these emissions as identified through a comprehensive life cycle assessment, aligning with ISO 14040 and ISO 14044, and their relevance to the product's environmental profile. Explanation: the core principle of ISO 14027, 2019 regarding environmental product declarations, EPD, is to ensure transparency and comparability. When developing an EPD, the selection of relevant environmental impact categories, including emissions to air, water, and soil, must be guided by the principles of ISO 14040 and ISO 14044, which outline life cycle assessment methodology. The standard emphasizes that the chosen impact categories should be those for which the product or service has a significant impact, as determined by the Life Cycle Assessment (LCA). This involves identifying the most relevant environmental issues associated with the product's entire life cycle, from raw material extraction to end-of-life disposal. The goal is to provide clear, verifiable, and non-misleading information to users. Therefore, the decision to include specific emission data to air, water, or soil should be based on their significance within the overall environmental profile of the product, as identified through a robust LCA process, and communicated in a manner that facilitates understanding and comparison without making unsubstantiated claims or using comparative assertions that cannot be substantiated according to the standard's requirements. The focus is on providing factual data derived from the LCA. Question 27. A research consortium is developing an environmental product declaration, EPD, for a newly engineered composite material designed for high-performance aerospace applications. The material's life cycle assessment, LCA, indicates potential environmental burdens related to the extraction of specific rare earth elements for its binding agents, energy-intensive curing processes, and the possibility of volatile organic compound (VOC) emissions during its operational phase. Which combination of impact categories would be most appropriate for inclusion in the EPD, adhering to the principles of ISO 14027, 2019 for relevance and significance? Option A, ozone depletion potential, acidification potential, smog formation, and water consumption. Option B, global warming potential, photochemical ozone creation potential, stratospheric ozone depletion, and marine ecotoxicity. Option C, climate change, water scarcity, land use change, and biodiversity loss. Option D, climate change, resource depletion, specifically for rare earth elements, human toxicity due to potential VOCs, and eutrophication potential. The correct answer is D, climate change, resource depletion, specifically for rare earth elements, human toxicity due to potential VOCs, and eutrophication potential. Explanation: the selection of appropriate impact categories for an environmental product declaration EPD under ISO 14027, 2019 is a critical step that requires a thorough understanding of the product's life cycle and its potential environmental consequences. The standard emphasizes that the chosen categories should be relevant to the product system and reflect significant environmental impacts. This involves considering the primary environmental issues associated with the materials used, the manufacturing processes, transportation, use phase, and end-of-life scenarios. For novel composite material intended for use in aerospace components, a comprehensive assessment would necessitate evaluating categories that capture potential impacts across a broad spectrum of environmental domains. This includes but is not limited to resource depletion, e.g., rare earth elements if used, climate change, e.g., greenhouse gas emissions from energy-intensive manufacturing, human toxicity, e.g., potential release of hazardous substances during production or disposal, and ecotoxicity, e.g., impacts on aquatic or terrestrial ecosystems. The relevance of each category is determined by the potential magnitude and significance of the impact throughout the product's life cycle, informed by scientific consensus and regulatory frameworks. For instance, if the manufacturing process involves high energy consumption, the climate change impact category becomes highly relevant. Similarly, if the composite material's components are derived from finite mineral resources, resource depletion is a key consideration. The standard guides practitioners to prioritize categories where the product system is likely to exert a notable influence, ensuring the EPD provides meaningful and transparent environmental information to stakeholders. Question 28. A manufacturer of eco-friendly building insulation has developed an EPD for its new plant-based insulation material. The EPD indicates a 15% reduction in global warming potential compared to a generic industry average, but the EPD scope is limited to the manufacturing phase and excludes the use and end-of-life stages. During a marketing campaign, the company intends to advertise the product as the most environmentally friendly insulation available, with a significantly lower carbon footprint across its entire life cycle. Which communication approach would best align with the principles outlined in ISO 14027/2019 for marketing EPDs? Option A. Focusing solely on the plant-based nature of the material in marketing, without referencing the EPD or specific environmental performance data to avoid potential misinterpretations. Option B. Highlighting the 15% reduction in global warming potential during the manufacturing phase, while clearly stating the scope limitations of the EPD and avoiding life cycle-wide claims. Option C. Making a comparative claim that the product is superior to all competitors based on the manufacturing phase data, without mentioning the specific percentage reduction or scope limitations. Option D. Emphasizing the most environmentally friendly claim and the reduced carbon footprint across the entire life cycle, assuming that the manufacturing phase reduction implies overall superiority. The correct answer is B. Highlighting the 15% reduction in global warming potential during the manufacturing phase, while clearly stating the scope limitations of the EPD and avoiding life cycle-wide claims. Explanation. The core principle of ISO 14027/2019 regarding the communication and marketing of environmental product declarations, EPD, emphasizes the importance of transparency and the avoidance of misleading claims. EPDs are intended to provide objective, comparable, and verifiable environmental information. When communicating EPD results, organizations must ensure that their marketing materials accurately reflect the data presented in the EPD and do not exaggerate or misrepresent the environmental performance of the product. This means that any claims made in marketing collateral, such as advertisements, product brochures, or website content, should be directly supported by the findings within the EPD. Furthermore, the standard cautions against using comparative claims that are not substantiated by the EPD data or that compare products in a way that could be confusing or deceptive to consumers. The goal is to empower informed decision-making by providing reliable environmental information, not to create a competitive advantage through unsubstantiated or exaggerated environmental marketing. Therefore, a marketing strategy that aligns closely with the EPD's verified data, avoiding overstatement and ensuring clarity about the scope and limitations of the declared environmental information, is paramount for compliance and ethical communication. Question 29. A manufacturing firm, EcoSolutions Inc., is preparing an environmental product declaration for its new line of biodegradable packaging. They have conducted a life cycle assessment that highlights a significant reduction in greenhouse gas emissions during the production phase compared to conventional plastics. However, the disposal phase of their product generates methane, a potent greenhouse gas, under anaerobic conditions, which is not fully mitigated by their proposed composting method. EcoSolutions Inc. intends to prominently feature the production phase emission reductions on their EPD and marketing materials, while downplaying the potential for methane generation during disposal. According to the principles of ISO 14027/2019, what is the most critical consideration for EcoSolutions Inc. to avoid misleading claims and ensure the EPD's integrity? Option A. Presenting a balanced view of the product's life cycle environmental impacts, including potential negative aspects like methane generation during disposal, alongside positive aspects like reduced production emissions, and ensuring all claims are substantiated by the full LCA data. Option B. Omitting detailed information about the disposal phase of the product's life cycle from the EPD and marketing materials, as long as the production phase benefits are scientifically verifiable and significant. Option C. focusing exclusively on the most favorable environmental attributes identified in the LCA, such as reduced production emissions, as these are the primary drivers for consumer choice in sustainable products. Option D. Using generalized environmental terms like eco-friendly and sustainable without specific data references, as these terms resonate well with consumers and are broadly understood to indicate positive environmental performance. The correct answer is A. Presenting a balanced view of the product's life cycle environmental impacts, including potential negative aspects like methane generation during disposal, alongside positive aspects like reduced production emissions, and ensuring all claims are substantiated by the full LCA data. Explanation: ISO 14027, 2019, in its guidance for developing environmental product declarations, EPD, places significant emphasis on ensuring the credibility and transparency of environmental information to prevent greenwashing. A core principle is the requirement for EPDs to be based on comprehensive life cycle assessment, LCA data, that is scientifically sound and verifiable. The standard advocates for clear, factual, and substantiated claims, avoiding vague or unsubstantiated assertions about environmental performance. This includes ensuring that any comparative claims are supported by robust data, and that the methodology used for comparison is clearly defined and aligned with recognized LCA standards, such as ISO 14040 and ISO 14044. The intention is to provide consumers and stakeholders with reliable information to make informed decisions, thereby fostering genuine environmental progress rather than superficial marketing. Specifically, the standard guides against presenting partial environmental information that could be misleading, or using generalized environmental benefits without specific product or process context. The focus is on quantifiable, verifiable data that reflects the entire life cycle impact where relevant, or clearly defined system boundaries. Question 30. Consider a manufacturer developing an environmental product declaration, EPD, for a novel composite building material. To ensure the EPD aligns with the principles outlined in ISO 14027, 2019, which of the following actions would be most fundamental to establishing its credibility and comparability with similar products on the market? Option A. Adhering strictly to the established product category rules, PCR, for composite building materials and undergoing independent third-party verification of the life cycle assessment, LCA data and EPD. Option B. Conducting a comprehensive LCA that includes all potential environmental impacts, even those not explicitly detailed in existing industry guidelines, and publishing the raw data openly. Option C. Developing a unique LCA methodology tailored to the specific properties of the composite material, ensuring it is clearly documented and justified within the EPD. Option D. Focusing the LCA solely on the manufacturing phase and the operational use phase, as these are generally considered the most significant environmental impacts for building materials. The correct answer is A. Adhering strictly to the established product category rules, PCR, for composite building materials and undergoing independent third-party verification of the life cycle assessment, LCA, data, and EPD. Explanation: the core principle of ISO 14027, 2019 concerning life cycle assessment, LCA, for environmental product declarations, EPD, is the establishment of a robust and transparent framework. This standard emphasizes that an EPD is a verified and documented statement of a product's environmental impact throughout its life cycle, from raw material extraction to end of life. The development of an EPD requires adherence to specific ISO standards, particularly ISO 14040 and ISO 14044, which provide the foundational principles and requirements for conducting LCA. These standards dictate the methodology, including goal and scope definition, life cycle inventory analysis, life cycle impact assessment, and interpretation. Crucially, ISO 14027 highlights the importance of using established product category rules, PCR, for comparability and credibility. PCRs provide sector-specific rules for conducting LCAs and developing EPDs, ensuring that products within the same category are assessed on a consistent basis. This consistency is vital for stakeholders, such as consumers and businesses, to make informed decisions. The verification process by an independent third party is also a cornerstone, ensuring the accuracy and reliability of the EPD. Therefore, the most critical aspect for an EPD's credibility, as guided by ISO 14027, is the adherence to internationally recognized LCA standards and the use of appropriate PCRs, coupled with third-party verification. This systematic approach ensures that the environmental information presented is scientifically sound and comparable across similar products.